Today, we are going to discuss an important theory in public policy that is called as the decision making theory. Decision making theory constitutes the center of public policy. In fact, there are three important theories in public policy. The first one is the decision making theory, the second one is the elite theory, and the third one is group theory. Among these theories, the decision making theory is an important theory. In fact, the policy formulation, the process of policy formulation involves a series of decisions, and these decisions are to be taken in a very rational manner. So, rational decision making is one of the important components of public policy. So, in today's class, we are going to discuss the importance of decision making in public policy and the issues of decision making, the structures of decision making, and the actors that are involved in the decision making, and the socio-economic conditions that force decision making. So, these are the important issues that we are going to discuss. First of all, public policy is a positive intervention of state. When the state tries to bring development with its intervention in a positive manner for the development of the society, public policies are required. That's why public policy is defined as the positive intervention of state. The positive intervention brings positive changes among the people in different sectors. As we all know, that in a public life we have educational sector, public health sector, tourism sector, import and export sector, industrial sector, agricultural sector. These are the different sectors of public domain. Among these public domain, the services, each department requires a policy. For example, the education department requires a national policy on education. That's called education policy. Likewise, industrial policy, agriculture policy, import and export policy, foreign policy, which is called as external policy, monetary policy. So likewise, we have so many policies. These policies are formulated by the government, the legislature and executive. They jointly formulate these policies. And these policies are designed by the executive and approved by the legislature. And if there is a judicial question on the violation of rights of people in the process of policy making or policy implementation, it is the judiciary that takes the responsibility of solving the legal questions. So, this is how public policy is involved. The process of legislature, executive, and judiciary. And political parties and mass media also play a very significant role in policy making. Likewise, the pressure groups in any society also play a very decisive role in public policy making. So, public policy as an academic discipline is developed in 20th century and public policies are studied as a matter of subject in 20th century. And two important philosophers, namely Thomas R. Dye and Harold Laswell, are considered to be the forerunners of public policy studies. And these two philosophers have started the policy sciences, the study of public policy, as an academic discipline in 20th century. And public policy as an academic discipline also studies about the process of policy making. While studying the policies of the process of public policy making, three important theories are very important. Three important theories are to be discussed. The first one is the decision making theory, the second one is the elite theory, and the third one is the group theory. Among these theories, decision making theory is considered to be a very important theory in policy making. In today's class, we are going to discuss the public policies and the decision making theory, the role of decision making theory in the policy making process. First of all, the government has to take a decision on form formulation of a particular policy. So that is called as the public domain. The government takes decisions to formulate policies on education, public health, environment, tourism, imports and exports, agriculture, industries, and so on. There are as many departments as in the government as we have public policies. Each department has its own policy. For example, the education department requires a policy on education, and industries department also policy on industries. Likewise, we have agriculture policy, import-export policy, tourism policy, youth welfare policy, women empowerment policy. So likewise, the government makes the policies and fix a target with a definite period for the development of society. This is related to different sections of development, the development of different sections of society. So the first and foremost decision that government has to take is which department has to be developed. In every society, there are priorities. Some areas of the state requires certain important policies, and certain important areas of society requires certain policies. For example, an area that requires drinking water gives more priority to water than primary education. An area which is having the basic infrastructure of roads, water, buildings, and every other thing, it gives importance on primary education. So there are certain development priorities. In the development priorities, each area has its own priority. Not all the areas have the same priority. So decision making should begin the area of development. If the government wants to develop a particular area with the protective water, drinking water, that's a decision. And it takes the decision in comparison with other departments. Should the government give more importance to drinking water? Or should it give more importance to primary education? Or it should give more importance to rural infrastructure like roads and buildings? The government has to take a decision. So the first and foremost decision that the government has to take in policy making is the area of development. Area of development requires the primary attention of development. For example, in some of the villages in Srikakulam district, where the problem of kidney diseases, ill health due to kidney malfunctioning is there. There, public health is the priority of the government. In areas where rainfall is very scant, agriculture is not so satisfactory, the government focuses on supply of food grains to the people to alleviate poverty among the people. In areas where the migration of people from rural areas to urban areas is more, the government takes up the rural employment guarantee schemes. So, this is how the area of development is a priority of the government in different areas. Not all the areas have the same priority of development. Some areas require the attention on education. Some areas require the attention on public health. Some areas require the attention of food grain supply. Some areas require the attention of skill development of the youth. So, likewise, you cannot have the same pattern of development or priorities of development for all the whole areas. Some districts require some priority of development, and other districts require some other area of development. So, decision making starts from deciding the area of development, the priorities of development. That is first thing. Secondly, this is called as identification of issues. Identification of issues where development is required. Identification of issues is one of the important aspects of public policy making. The decision starts from identification of issues, where the government identify certain priorities. So, in the decision making theory, the first and foremost component is decision making on issues of development. Decision making on issues of development. Which issue of development should be given more priority? Is it education? Is it public health? Is it women and child welfare? Or is it the supply of food grains? The government has to decide. It has to identify one area, one prime area of development. So, identification of the primary area of development is one of the major decisions that the government has to take in public policy making. That is one thing. Secondly, who has to take the decision? What are the structures that are to take the decision? Is it the legislature, or is the executive, or is the political parties, or is it the cabinet? Who has to take the decisions? So, secondly, we have to identify the structures of decision making. Some decisions are to be taken at the local level, some decisions are to be taken at the state level. You need to have decision making both at the micro level and macro level. For issues of local importance, the district collector or Jilla Parishad chairman, Mandal Praja Parishad chairman, village sarpanch, Mandal revenue officer, joint collector, additional collector, these officials are empowered to take the decision. So, on all the issues relating to micro level development, the decision making is done by the field staff or the staff related to the employment, grassroots employees. So, this is one thing. Secondly, certain decisions are to be taken at the state level. the state cabinet has to take decision. For example, the state of Telangana, the government of Telangana has taken a decision to write up the loans of all the agricultural families. So this is a major decision at the state level. So the state level decision is to be taken up at the state level leadership. So we have to identify in the public policy making. The first thing is you have to identify the areas of decision making. The secondly, the structures of development, the structures of decision making. Decision making is to be taken, is it at the local level or at the national level or at the micro level or macro level? This is to be decided. So this is the second important step in the decision making process. So decision making process involves the local leadership as well as the state leadership. And sometimes it may also require the national leadership. Certain policies are national policies. Certain policies are state level policies. Certain policies are related only to the particular area or regions. So this is how, depending on the scope of the public policy, if the scope is very wider and if it requires the national attention, that becomes a national policy. If the scope is a little narrower and that requires only state attention, that is only state policy. And if the decision requires the local level attention, that's called as the local policy. So in each of these steps, in each of these levels, national level, state level, regional level, or sub-regional level, village level, district level, we have to identify the structures that have to take the decisions. Structures involves institutions. What are the institutions that are involved in decision making? For example, if a national policy is required, we require the consent of the Indian Parliament or Indian Cabinet. So, the executive and legislature at the national level is required. The decision making involves the political institutions at the national level. And if it is required at the state level, state assembly, state cabinet, governor, chief minister, these structures are involved. If the decision is related to the local problems, the structures of Jilla Parishad, district mandal level officials is required. So, the first and foremost important aspect in decision making is decisions, the areas of development, identifying the areas of development on which decisions are made, are to be made. Secondly, identifying the structures that are to take decisions. And thirdly, who are the actors involved, officials involved in taking the decisions? For formulating a public policy, you have to take a decision. So for that, certain officials are key officials. Take, for example, for all the education department decisions, we require the attention of the principal secretary of education or the chairman of the State Council of Higher Education or commissioner of secondary education. So these officials are very important. In fact, these officials have initiated the formulation of public policies. These are called as the actors of policy making. The executive, which are directly involved in formulating the policy, and they give a proposal to the legislature for its approval. These officials are called as the actors, actors of policy making, actors of public policies. Generally, all the government department officials, IAS officers, IPS officers, are known as the actors of public policies. Once they involved, they define the public policy, they define the objectives, the goals, and also the phases of public policy making and implementation. These are called as the actors of public policy making. And certain policies require the intervention of the Reserve Bank of India, RBI, and economic advisors of the government. The national policies require the attention of national level officials. So the actors of public policy also differ based on the extent of policy that influences the people. If the policy influences only the local people, local administrative staff, local permanent executive are called as the actors. If the public policy influences the whole state, the officials involved at the state level are called as the actors. If the policy influences the whole country, both in formulation, implementation, and evaluation, the actors involved are national level bureaucracy and experts related to bureaucracy at the national level, officials of RBI, officials of Economic Affairs Department, Economic Advisor. These officials are also involved. So, based on the extent of influence that the policy undergoes, the officials are also to be identified. National level officials, local level officials, or state level officials likewise. They are called as the actors of the public policy. So, friends, there are different steps. We have kind of studied three steps. The first one is we have to identify the areas on which decisions are to be made for the development of the people. Secondly, we have to identify the structures that are to take decisions in public policy making. And thirdly, we have to identify the actors or the officials or the permanent executive that play a key role in the policy formulation and policy implementation. These are the three steps. And the fourth one is we also should study about the alternative course of action. When we are taking a decision, the decision involves choosing of many one decision among many decisions. We have to keep many decisions as alternatives. Among them, we have to choose one. We have to choose a decision which is very rational, which is very cost effective, which is less expensive, and which is more beneficial to the people. So we have to choose among the various decisions that are available to make a public policy. So choosing the alternatives and studying the alternative course of action is also one of the important aspects of decision making. We have to choose the alternative decisions, one decision among many decisions. Take, for example, we have to take a decision on education, on midday meal scheme. Is it enough to provide midday meals to the students, or is it enough to provide some snacks instead of meals to the students daily? Or is it good to provide most nutritious food like eggs in the school daily? So, likewise, you have to take a decision. What constitutes the midday meals? Is it complete lunch of rice? Is it wheat? Or is it vegetables? Or is it eggs? You have to take a decision. So that means when we are taking decision, we should also study about alternatives for the decision. And we have to choose one decision from various decisions, alternative decisions available. And this decision should be very rational, less expensive, more beneficial to the people. So choosing one decisions among various decisions is another important component in decision making. Suppose the government wants to take a decision on rural infrastructure. To develop the rural infrastructure, the government has to lay the road from district roadway to the village roadways. This is one thing. Secondly, it has to lay the road, a pakka cement road. And thirdly, it has to lay the road it is only repairing the previous road, likewise. So, depending on the economic resources available and depending on the urgency of the policy, decisions are to be taken by studying clearly various alternatives available in making a decision. So, every decision is chosen from among the various alternative paths of decisions. We have so many decisions. We have so many alternatives available for taking decisions. And among them, you have to choose one. And your decision should always be rational and reasonable. The decision should be less expensive, more beneficial to the people. And the decision should also be, the influence of the decision should be long lasting. So these are various factors that are to be studied in making decisions. So decision making involves various steps. The first step is identification of issues on which decisions are to be made. Secondly, the structures involved in taking the decisions. And thirdly, the actors or the officials who are to formulate the decisions and who formulate the decisions and formulate these decisions as public policies. And fourthly, studying the alternatives available to solve a particular problem. So this is another one. And the fifth one is factors influence decision making. What are the factors that influence the decision making? There are various factors that influence the decision making. There are economic factors, there are social factors, there are demographic factors, there are cultural factors, there are factors related to science and technology. So all these factors are to be studied. Among these factors, we have socio-economic factors is very important. The socio-economic factors are related to the social status of the people and economic status of the people. Any public policy or decision making that leads to the formulation of public policy should bring a perceptible change in the social position of the person, in the economic position of the people. If the policy doesn't provide socio-economic change, that policy is not worth taking. A policy should bring a perceptible social change, economic change. It should provide a better life. It should enhance the dignity of the individual and self respect of the individual. So, this is how there are various economic factors, social factors, cultural factors, factors related to science and technology, and sometimes in political factors that are to be studied before taking a decision. When once a decision is taken, the decision has so many important factors. What are the factors that led to the decision making? What are the social factors? Take, for example, the central government has introduced Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao program. And for that, the government has done so much of homework. The national Health Mission has studied that women education is very scant in some areas, and women need to be educated, and longer years of women stay in a school is required, and dropout rates among the women students is more. So these are the factors. These are the social factors that forced the government to come out with a Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao policy. So once a policy is made, the government examines various social factors, various economic factors, various political factors, and factors relating to science and technology in taking decisions. So, in public policy making, particularly in the decision making theory, we have to study about various factors, the socio-economic factors, the political factors, economic factors, the cultural factors, and factors relating to the science and technology are to be kept in mind in taking a decision. There are various factors that force the government to take a public policy. If these factors are not there, there is no need of a public policy. Public policy is the urgency of the state to intervene to better the lives of the people on a particular public service. May it be education, may it be public health, or may it be imports and exports, may it be women empowerment, or any other thing. There are so many factors that influence the government to formulate a public policy. So, studying these public policies in the light of various factors, the social factors, economic factors, the political factors, and technological factors, scientific factors, is also an important aspect of policy studies. So, now let us see what are the items that we have studied till now. The decision making theory is an important theory. This decision making theory is given by many philosophers, mainly the Dijk. Verman Dijk is a philosopher who has given this theory. And according to Verman Dijk theory, this is called the theory of decision making in public policy. Various steps are involved in this. The first step is identification of issues on which decisions are to be made. Secondly, the structures that take the decisions. You have to identify the structures that are to take decisions. And thirdly, the actors involved in taking the decisions. And fourthly, the alternatives available for a decision, which are very less expensive and more beneficial to the people. And we have to study the alternatives while coming to a decision. And fifthly, what are the factors that are responsible for taking a decision? So, the factors that are to be understood first in taking the decisions, the social factors, the economic factors, the cultural factors, the factors related to science and technology, the political factors. There is various factors that force the government to take a decision. Decision making involves the multiple, the interplay of various factors that we have to study. And sixthly, the external factors, pressures and constraints. The factors are, in fact, there are two types of factors. One are the internal factors, the other one is external factors. The internal factors are related to the economy, polity, culture, traditions, technology, and other things. But there are also external factors. External factors are related to imports and exports and India's relations with other countries. So these are the other factors, they're the external factors. And there may be constraints and pressures from the external factors. So these are some of the factors that influence the policy making. Policy making is guided by internal factors and external factors. The internal factors are always the factors related to economy, polity, society, culture, and other things. But external factors are related to the society's relations with other societies, the society's imports and exports with other countries, the society's cooperative relations or conflict relations with other countries, and that particular society's membership in an international bodies. So these are the external factors that influence the policy making. We have to study both the internal factors and also the external factors. And lastly, what is the outcome? Outcome of the decision making is also to be understood. When once a decision is taken, how the decision will affect the people. We have to think it, we have to assume ourselves how far it will solve the problem, how far it will resolve the problem. So, friends, these are some of the important issues in public policy making. Public policy making involves three important theories. One is the decision making theory, the other one is the group theory, and the third one is the elite theory. And these three theories are very important. And among these three theories, we have to discuss the decision making theory. And decision making theory in itself has so many steps. The first and foremost important aspect is in the decision making theory, we have to identify the area where the decisions are required. That is one thing. You have to identify the area where the decisions are required. Secondly, what are the structures that are involved in taking the decisions? National level structures, state level structures, local level structures. This is how the structures are to be identified. And thirdly, who are the actors? Who are the actors that have to take the decisions? And they should play a proactive role in decision making, policy formulation, policy implementation, policy evaluation. In fact, public policy making involves four stages. The first one is policy making, and second one is policy implementation, and third one is policy interpretation, and fourth one is policy evaluation. A policy is to be evaluated periodically for every 6 months, whether the policy has reached the targeted results or not. If it is not reaching the results, what are the changes that we need to do for the public policy to make it much more beneficial to the people, to much more reach the targeted groups? So, this is how the public policies are to be evaluated periodically. The periodical evaluation of public policies is also required. And public policy formulation, public policy implementation, public policy interpretation. The judiciary makes interpretation of public policies. If there is a question of violation of human rights or civil rights of the people, it is the judiciary that implements, that intervenes, and it gives new scope for the implementation of public policies. And likewise, policies are to be evaluated periodically. A periodical evaluation of public policy is required. Without proper evaluation of public policy in a periodical manner, the public policy cannot reach its target groups or cannot benefit the people in an assumed manner. That's why policy is to be evaluated periodically. If a public policy is made It should be evaluated annually or biannually or monthly or quarterly by involving all the officials who are implementing the policies. So this is called as policy evaluation. Policy evaluation is required to repair the policy. When the policy is not reaching its targets, is not benefiting the people properly, some repairs are required, some changes are required in the policies. And with those changes, the policies can be benefited to more, made beneficial to people in a much more concrete manner. So, public policy making involves so many steps. The first one is identifying the areas where public policies are required. Secondly, the structures involved in policy making. What are the structures that are required in the public policy making? National structures, regional structures, state level structures, local structures. Who are to be involved in the public policy making? If the policy is a national policy, national level structures are to be involved. If the policy is related to a state level policy, state level structures are to be involved. If the policy has a functional scope of only regional level or sub-regional level, local officials are to be involved. So the structures of public policy, the structures of decision making is the second important aspect. And thirdly, who are the actors who proactively formulate the policy, implement the policy, evaluate the policy, and make an objective evaluation of the policy from time to time. So this is called as the actors involved in it. This is the third important step. Fourthly, when a policy decision is to be taken, first you have to study alternatives, alternative decisions. When alternatives or all alternatives are accepted or studied properly, one rational decision among the alternatives is to be chosen. And that decision should be rational, that decision should be reasonable, and that decision should be cost effective and less expensive, and that decision should be more beneficial to the people. And sometimes a policy should reach the people more speedily. Time, the element of time is also a component in making decisions. And likewise, the fifth point is in the policy decisions, we have to study the factors that influence the policy making, the socio-economic factors, the political factors, the cultural factors, the factors related to science and technology. These are to be taken into consideration. And likewise, the external factors are also very important. And in fact, so every society is not an autonomous society. It always depends on other societies. So there is always a cooperation and conflict with other countries and other societies from one society. So that's why we have to see what are the external factors and what are the external pressures and constraints in the policies. And likewise, lastly, we have to study the outcomes of the decisions. When we take a decision, we must also study the outcome of the decision. What is the outcome of the decision? So, what is the result of the decision? Sometimes the result is positive, sometimes it is negative. Whether it is positive or negative, that's an outcome. If the public policy achieves its desired results, it's well and good. If the policy is not reaching to the targets and it is not reaching the desired results, then it needs to be repaired. It needs to be evaluated again and again. So this is called as outcome of decisions. So friends, these are the decision making theory involves 7 steps. There are 7 steps in decision making in public policy making. The first step is related to identification of issues on which decisions are to be made. Identification of issues. Secondly, identification of structures that are to take the decisions. And thirdly, what are the actors that are involved in taking the decisions? And fourthly, study about the alternatives of the decisions, alternatives available for one decision. What are the other alternatives available for taking a decision? You have to choose one among the alternatives. And fifthly, what are the factors that influence the public policy making? What are the social factors, economic factors, political factors, cultural factors, factors relating to science and technology? So, how these factors influence the public policy making is to be studied. And sixthly, what are the external factors, external constraints and external pressures and constraints that act upon the decisions? And lastly, what is the outcome of the decisions? Outcome of the decisions. So these are the 7 steps involved in policy making, decision making and policy making, policy formulation. Let me briefly discuss these things once again for the benefit of our students. The public policy is the positive intervention of state in any public area, and it brings a positive change in the lives of the people. It betters the lives of the people from the previous patterns of life. And public policies are considered as the positive intervention of state. And we have as many policies as we have government departments, like education policy, industrial policy, agriculture policy, environment policy, import export policy, external affairs policy. Likewise, we have so many policies, as many government departments as policies. And public policy always require the decision making. The decision making is very important in policy making. These decisions are to be made for policy making. They are called as policy decisions. Decisions for policy making, decisions for policy formulation, decisions for policy implementation, decision for policy evaluation. So they are called as the policy decisions. So these policy decisions are the decisions are policy making, policy formulation. They involve some 7 steps of study. The first one is the decision making theory says there are 7 steps that are involved in taking decisions in public policies. The first one is identification of issues. Identification of issues is the first one. We have to identify the area where decision is to be taken. Decision on education, decision on public health, decision on women empowerment, decision on environment, on which area you have to take a decision. Identification of area is the first step. Secondly, structures involved in taking the decision. Which structure has to take the decision? Is it legislature, or is it executive, or judiciary, or political parties, or bureaucracy, or state cabinet, or central cabinet, or Jilla Parishad? Which structure has to take the decision? That is the second step. The structures involved in taking decisions. And thirdly, actors involved in taking decisions. Who are the actors? Who are the officials? Officials or non officials? Some of the government leaders, like political leaders, political executive, or administrative executive, or bureaucracy, they play a very proactive role in taking the decisions. So we have to study about the actors involved in public policy making. And fourthly, alternative course of action, alternative course of decisions. When we are taking a decision, we have to study what are the alternatives available to take the decision. And you have to choose one decision among many. That decision should always be reasonable, rational, cost effective, less expensive, and more beneficial to the student, more beneficial to the people. So, this is how we have to study the alternative course of action. This is the fourth important step. The fifth one is we have to study the factors involved in the taking decisions. What are the social factors, economic factors, cultural factors, political factors, factors relating to science and technology that are related to taking decisions. And sixth important character is what are the external factors in addition to the internal factors. There are also external factors. What are the external factors that are related to taking decisions? What are the pressures and constraints that play a role? And lastly, what is the outcome of the decision? We have to discuss about the outcome of the decision also. So, if all these issues are discussed, that is called as the decision making theory. Decision making theory in public policy is very important, and it involves 7 steps in the decision making of policy making. The first one is identification of area or identification of issues. Secondly, structures involved in decision making. Thirdly, actors involved in decision making. Fourthly, alternatives course of action from which one decision is to be selected from various alternative policies. And fifthly, the factors, the influence of various factors on decision making. What are the social factors, economic factors, political factors, cultural factors, factors relating to science and technology that influence the decision making. And sixthly, what are the external factors? Not only just the internal factors, but also the external factors, external pressures and constraints that influence the public policy making. And lastly, what is the outcome of the public policies? So these are the issues that are involved in policy making and decision making theory of the policies. And this decision making theory is given by Verman Dyke. Verman Dyke is a policy scientist. D-Y-K-E Dyke. Verman Dyke is a Western philosopher and policy scientist who have given this theory of decision making in public policy making. So, friends, in the next class, we are discussing some other aspects of public policy making. Thank you, friends. Thank you. Mr. Guru.